Christian Hartau. Welcome to School of Management, Fudan University.
Thank you.
It's my great honor to have a chance to interview you about Industry 4.0. As you know, Industry 4.0 is a well-known concept in the world. I think the original concept comes from Germany. Okay, so in your opinion, what's the essence of Industry 4.0?
Yeah, I mean, Industry 4.0, or people sometimes say it's the fourth revolution of the industry. In essence, it's about the data which is generated and what you can make out of data. It has a lot to do with integrating different systems. It has a lot to do with innovation, which comes out of it. And it has a lot to do with new technologies, like digital technologies. But I think for the first time now, with this 4.0, a big difference is also the way how we collaborate, the way how we work together. And I mean, you know, one of these phrases is often called the agile way of working. I think it's not only about agile, but it's mainly about collaborating in a much broader scale than we had before.
Okay, in my opinion, I think to make Industry 4.0 implementable or successful, I think we need to have at least two drivers. One is technological innovation. The other one is managerial innovation. Right? For technological innovation, I think Germany is very famous in terms of this aspect. The other side is managerial innovation. So nowadays in China, let's say, for a lot of unicorn companies, especially in B2C consumption industry, you know, a lot of big companies, they focus on organizational capability. They continue to adapt their organizational structure. So in your opinion, let's say, if we want to make Industry 4.0 successful, should we adapt our organizational structure continuously, or should we, let's say, build, you know, let's say, a very, very strong organizational structure?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say organizational structures need to be reviewed from time to time, because nothing is engraved in stone, and what worked yesterday doesn't necessarily need to work tomorrow. I think what we see with digitalization and Industry 4.0 is that the speed gets much, much faster. And I think, to answer your question, I think it's even, I would say, it's vital that we realign our organizations, and I think in a way that we move from dedicated tasks of one unit to more, again, the collaborative way of working together. And sometimes it even hinders you if you have too many boxes where people identify themselves with. So it's much better to have a mindset of openness. And I think that can be achieved by changing also an organizational setup.
Yeah, because in China, let's say like Alibaba, a big giant in e-commerce, on one hand, I think, let's say, they try to attract more and more consumers in terms of customer flow, and on the other hand, back end, they focus on building organizational capability very much. I think they spend a lot of energy, spend a lot of money on building organizational capability. Let's say for implementation of Industry 4.0, I think, again, people are very, very important, right? So compared to those consumption business, manufacturing business is kind of traditional, and the organizational structure for manufacturing industry is relatively stable, right? If you really want to change the organizational structure for manufacturing industry, I think it's pretty challenging in some aspects, right?
Yes. Yes, I mean, I would say there are two parts of it. The one part is, I think we need people today with a skill set that just didn't exist 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago. If you talk about artificial intelligence experts, if you talk about data analysts, these are all new jobs that didn't exist. And today we see there's a lot of fight for getting these talents on board. They can essentially choose which company they want to work for because they're very well sought after. That's the one part. And the other part, I think, is what you mentioned, also the existing people you have in your organizational units, especially in manufacturing, to open up their mindset and to broaden them in order to be open for new technologies. And we see that there is a lot of change necessary, which needs to be supported from the management, and also a lot of efforts to convince people, because it's very well known, if you want to introduce something and the majority of your organization is against it, even as the top executives, you can shout as loud as you want. If people don't believe in it, at the end of the day, you won't be successful. And therefore, for me, this is also a part of this industry transformation, that you need to spend more and more time making the case, convincing your people.
Okay, good. Also, in your presentation, you talked about digitalization strategy, also digitalization practice at Wacker. You mentioned that 50% of orders currently, actually, they are online. And our aim is really to move this to a fully digital system within the next couple of years. And of course, you cannot do it alone. You need the customers. Right.
And we have a very broad customer structure. So we have big multinationals. Typically with them, they are also on a digital track, I would say. But we also have small and mid-sized customers. And for them, sometimes it's more challenging and maybe not affordable for the time being. But I believe it will be a big benefit for us if we can really integrate the whole supply chain from order entry to really delivery of product logistics in one system. And I would say that the manufacturing industry or chemical industry today isn't there, and it's quite a way to go. We have many different complex systems, be it on the customer relationship side, be it in the plants, even on a lower level on the process control systems, and to fully align them, that will definitely take some time. But I'm absolutely confident the one who's the first will create the biggest benefit, and that's why we focus a lot on these topics.
Yeah, right. So another question is, Wacker actually is a hidden champion in chemical industry. I think, let's say for those hidden champions, if they want to obtain or acquire a larger market, they want to have global strategy, they want to sell the products to global market. Nowadays, actually in China, here we have a huge market,
yes.
Right? And different consumers, they have different demand. And so this creates actually a lot of opportunities for local Chinese companies, okay? So some Chinese companies, actually, they can just produce, let's say, high quality, high-end products, and their competitors, they can produce, let's say, relatively low quality products to serve different customer segments, right? And also they do not need to consider global market, essentially, because the Chinese market is already pretty big, right? So what's your suggestion for this kind of companies in China? Like, let's say, right now their focus is not that high-end products.
Yeah, I think what we see in China is it is by far the biggest chemical market in the world, and I'm truly convinced that this will continue. And rightly said, therefore we see it as a great opportunity to have here our foot on the ground in China. We have about 1,000 people now, more than 1,000 people working for Wacker. And we're doing a lot of R&D as well, in order really to become a more Chinese player. And that's really our vision. I mean, we want to be a global company, but in China, we want to act like a Chinese company, because we believe that's the secret to our success. And therefore, we need talented people and a lot of understanding of our customers. There are a lot of competitors in China, obviously, because if you're in the biggest market, with the biggest opportunities, you're not alone. And you also mentioned there are still, I would say, quite some companies who may not focus so much on quality. On the other hand, I would say if you really look medium to long term, I'm very much convinced that also the Chinese industry structure will change. And also the Chinese government is pushing also an upgrading the industry. And I think this is going exactly in that direction. And at the end of the day, I think it will be the high quality product with superior properties will succeed. And a good example, for example, is what we see in the photovoltaic market. We also supply a lot of polysilicon for Chinese solar modules to be produced. And we see the highest quality monocrystalline solar panels. It's a huge success story compared to the multicrystalline, which are lower quality, easier to produce. So and I think it's a good example what happened here in China in recent years. This trend to high quality products with better performance, more sustainable production will be the answer. And I think everybody who's not adapting to it might risk of losing competitiveness.
Actually, in China, we also have a number of big companies. Right? They are listed among the big Fortune 500.
Yes.
So for those companies, actually, they also want to sell their products globally. So that's if one of those companies, they want to enter German market, do you have any suggestions to those manufacturing companies of China?
Well, I think I wouldn't say that it's a specific question for these companies. I think once you started in one specific market, in this case it's the biggest of the world, okay? But still, I think the success comes when you understand the needs of your customers. And we observe since many years that customer needs are different. I mean, when we are active also in the cosmetic or health, personal care sector. There is a different demand of end customers in India versus Germany versus China. So if you think you can make a great shampoo, hair shampoo for ladies in Germany, and you think you can make a success story with that in India or China, you will fail. I think you will be successful if you can adapt to the local customer needs. And therefore, coming back to your question, if you have a strong, big player in China who wants to enter the German market, you have to understand the German market needs in order to be successful.
Okay.
So it's not more difficult than anywhere else in the world, I would say. It's just, people have different needs.
Right. Just same story here,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like Waco enters Chinese market, you need to understand the needs of Chinese customers.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
it's very important. So another thing is like regarding Industry 4.0. So basically, I think the reason why, part of the reason why we try to implement Industry 4.0 is nowadays customer demand becomes more and more personalized. In Chinese we have so-called, let's say, thousands of people that have thousands different faces, which means different people have different demand, right?
Yes.
In your mind, that's how Industry 4.0 can help in this regard.
Actually, I believe that Industry 4.0 is the cornerstone of having a more flexibilized and individualized production. And I fully agree with you. This will be the trend which we will see in the future, definitely in the B2C sector, but I guess also in the B2B sector. And the one who can adapt the fastest will have a big benefit. And I think we need to come to more flexible production sites. And this more flexible means, you lose economies of scale, and that's kind of the challenge. Yeah. How can you manage this? Having lesser production. And I think the answer is you need highly efficient processes. You need as little as possible waste streams. And you need a very constant and top-notch quality. And I think the tools of digital, being it sensors, being it advanced process control system, but also being it artificial intelligence modules, which kind of have a feedback loop on your process. They will enable us to compete against the, let's say, old style, big vessel with huge volume, but only making one product at a time.
Okay.
So it won't be possible without Industry 4.0, I would say.
Okay. So also, let's say during the presentation, actually, I mentioned about the book written by Herman Simon, Hidden Champions,
Yes.
right? So in his book again, he surveyed nearly 2,700 hidden champions. So nearly half of them come from Germany, and also then I think the remaining companies, they come from USA, Japan, and China. Okay, and also different countries, they have different national strategy to lead their manufacturing industry to the future, right? So in your opinion, let's say, what do you see the future of the manufacturing industry globally? Considering the four countries, either competition and also cooperation.
Well, I mean, in general, often when you hear talks about digitalization and new business models, and many people are kind of a little pessimistic about the manufacturing industry. I disagree. Because at the end of the day, you would like to hold something in your hand, and even if it's a smartphone. I mean, you cannot digitalize a smartphone. It's a great digital device, but somebody at the end of the day needs to produce it. I guess tomorrow we want to sit on a chair. Somebody needs to produce a chair. I don't want to sit on a virtual chair. I like a chair. So therefore, I think there are a lot of opportunities in the manufacturing sector globally. So I'm not the pessimist on that. But I think you need to be prepared. I mean, the more flexible you can produce, the better quality you can produce, and at a competitive cost, that will become really a prerequisite. And everybody who's not coping with that might get into trouble. If you compare the different countries, I mean, for me, an interesting example is, like what we saw in Europe. I mean, Germany always kept a high share of manufacturing. And I think that's also part of the success model of these hidden champions, but also the bigger manufacturing companies. They always improved, and they always wanted to be the best in quality and in performance. And then you have your market. In the UK, on the contrary, there was a strong trend decades ago to move out of manufacturing and think that everything is great within financial services. I have my doubt if that is the right strategy. Yes, we need financial services, no doubt. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to produce stuff. And if you now make the spin to the US and China, I think the US had a similar trend of getting manufacturing out of the country. I think the challenge is, once it's out, it is very difficult to get it back, because you don't maybe have not the right skilled people. I mean, and also this idea of, that Apple should now produce in the US. I think it's just not possible anymore, because the highly skilled people that make these equipment, they're in China. So you just cannot say, move it back.
It's not just only about machines, equipment.
It's about the people.
It's about people, but it's about the whole value chain.
Right? And from that perspective, I think the Chinese strategy that always focused on manufacturing and now on upgrading the manufacturing is definitely the right way forward. And I see a lot of chances for the global trade and for global manufacturing. I think what is key, that we need to have a level playing field, so that there are not unfair conditions and unfair subsidies on this side or that side. Wacker always had a very strong stand on this, and also we very much appreciate the statements from Li Keqiang at the Boao Forum, which I visited in March, where he also gave a clear commitment to level playing fields. And then there are endless opportunities for everybody in the world, and I think this is something we should continue to follow up.